Hi, this is Larry. What I want to talk to you today is about the Group By clause. You should be pretty familiar right now working with the select clause and being able to get select tables from one single table or multiple tables. We're going to talk today about the clause for the Group By and how it's used. You're used to getting a result set that you can get from one or more tables, such as it ends up being a grid, as we see below here. And so when you're doing selects, the select clause determines columns to be displayed. So basically, all you're looking for at the select statement is to say what columns are displayed. So I'm looking for this column or this column or this column, but not that one, I'll take this one. What columns to display. What the Group By does is the Group By tries to put it together also by the rows. So the Group By clause groups rows with similarities in columns. So not only now are you looking at just what columns to use, you're also saying, well, what entities? Each row is in a unique entity. What entities? How can we group by the different rows inside there? And these are commonly used with aggregate functions, such as average, sum, minimum, maximum, or count. Basically, when you want to put in your select statement and you want to have a sum of something or an average of something, or even a count, you may want to group it by different types of entities. For instance, if you have customers are ordering and it's an order table, you may want to find out the different customers and how many orders they've placed. So you may want to count the number of orders that are being placed, but have it grouped by the number of the type of customers. So you may have a customer number and it would show how many different orders they've placed. So that's what a Group By basically is all about. Now, some of the elements to work with a Group By are the condition of having. In the select clause, you select from where, and the where gives you the conditions by which upon the select is using. Group By uses having in the same way. It sets conditions for the Group By. Keep in mind that with your Group By, you may have more than a column in a clause. And the columns specified in Group By clause must also be in the select clause, meaning that you can't group by something unless it's already determined in the select clause. Meaning you have to still identify the column there and then say what column in that select clause are you grouping by. And you can have different columns that are you grouping by, kind of like an order by even, right? So and understand that null values in a column is its own group, Okay, so keep that in mind. All right, let's go next to looking at considering that Group Bys are very similar to distinct, the use of distinct. So if you want to, you can list all customer cities by simply going select city from customer group by city, or at the same time you can say distinct city from customer and come up with the same results. In this case, we're only looking at one column, and it's very simple. In a column, you're using a simple distinct for a column to look for, and that's the same thing you can do with a Group By very simply. Both of these queries will return the same exact result set. And remember this, as distinct is then superfluous when the select clause includes columns specified in the Group By clause, meaning that you do not want to put select distinct and then another factor to do with a Group By. So those are two different areas. I use distinct again there, but it's two distinct clauses, but they can be used very similar. Let's look at a couple examples of this. Take a look at the first one. The first one, we want to provide the number of customers for each sales rep, meaning that we'd have a select clause that says sales number, count the customer numbers as customers. Count is an aggregate function. Sales number is just a column. All right? So what we're going to do is we're going to draw from the customer table this information, one table. And in this case, we want to group by sales number because we want to provide the number of customers for each sales rep. So if I was to build this SQL statement, I'd look at this and say provide the number of customers for each sales rep. And I would say, oh, okay, so I need to have a sales rep as being in the select statement. And I get a sales number for that in the customers table. And then I need to find the number of customers for each one. Well, I can count the number of customers. But if you ran this just uniquely by itself without the group by, you'd get an error. So therefore you need to have a group by sales number, and you're going to get the following different result. Sales number customers. So for sales rep number 3, he has 3 customers. Sales rep number 6 has 4, etc. Let's take a look at another example. Provide the number of customers for each sales rep that have the same credit limit. So I need to know the sales rep, so again the sales number, and then I also need to know their credit limit, and then I need to know the customer numbers as the total customer, the number of customers for each sales rep. So therefore I know I can go to the customer table, and I can get in that table the sales number and the credit limit number, and therefore I can group by them, and this is what the result set would look like. So group by is very powerful in the sense that it can actually take, instead of just looking at columns, you can aggregate data more easily by specific columns within the table or tables. Let's take now a look at a real example of some SQL statements run in SQL Server. These are a series of different SQL statements. You can see them all right up in front here on top. And there's several of them. And I've given also where it's got the 2 dashes, that means that it's comments. And they don't affect SQL query itself. The first query basically displays all the data in the invoice table. And you can see down in here, if I flip down now to the bottom where the result set is, you can see that there are different multiple result sets for this one query because I have different SQL statements. If you look at it here, I've got invoice. It shows that there are, if you scroll through it, there are 114 different invoices. Okay, and they've got the different columns. Now let's say we had a query that we wanted to return. You gave instructions today: return total number of invoices and average invoice total. Well, I can count the total number of invoices, and I give it a name, total invoices, and I can average those, right? And if I do that, this is the result set that I get, would be the second one here. And this one shows that I have 114 total invoices, which we discovered by just looking at the table, and the average invoice amount is that. And that's what the second query does. Now let's look at the next one. The next one says provide the average invoice total for every vendor. Well, we know we can get the average invoice. We already did that in the query above. But that only provided at the average for the second query only provided for the average for all the invoices. But now we want to know by individual vendor. So we know we need to have the vendor number and the average invoice total, which we have here in the select statement. We're getting it from the invoices table. But in this case, since we want to provide the average for every vendor, we're going to have to use a group by, because we need to group by that vendor their average. And if you scroll down here, you're going to see then the average vendor and the average invoice number. So for every vendor, this is their average invoice number. Okay? And then if you wanted to, you can even ask more specifically here. We can say, provide the vendor number and average invoice total where the average invoice total is greater than $2,000 for a vendor. So you can see here we got the vendor number just like we did before, but now we're using having. The having is actually like the where statement in the from, meaning that group by needs a having to do any kind of differentiation or more definitive information from it. So we look at average having invoice total greater than 2,000. And if you scroll down then to the next one, you can see here is that you can see by vendor, you can see the average, and it's actually in sequence here. It shows the average invoice amount. We could also look at this another way too. What about if we wanted to find out by the order the same information that we got in this one, but we wanted to order it by the average invoice total number, average invoice amount, excuse me. And in that case, we'd simply just add an order by to this and say descending. And in that case, we look at the last down here, look at the last list of a result set. You'll find the vendor numbers out of sequence, but it ranks it by the average invoice amount. So you can see I've stepped through here and shown you a little bit basically how group bys work and how effective they can be in providing numbers like this.